The content provided in this video is strictly for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute professional academic, financial, or legal advice. The landscape of higher education funding, university admissions, and scholarship distribution within the United States is highly competitive, complex, and subject to constant, unpredictable changes. Throughout this presentation, we will discuss historical trends, analyze specific case studies, and explore potential outcomes based on previous admission cycles. However, these examples do not guarantee future results or represent potential outcomes for every individual viewer. Scholarships and grants are awarded at the sole subjective discretion of their respective granting institutions and foundations. No strategies, writing techniques, or frameworks discussed herein guarantee acceptance, financial compensation, or debt reduction. Viewers are strongly advised to conduct their own extensive due diligence, carefully review the specific, up-to-date guidelines provided by individual scholarship committees, and consult with certified high school counselors, university financial aid offices, or independent educational consultants before submitting any application materials or making financial decisions regarding higher education. Relying solely on the contents of this video is done entirely at your own risk. Right now, as you sit watching this, an admissions officer at a top-tier United States university or an evaluator for a prestigious private scholarship foundation is staring at a computer screen, completely exhausted. They have read exactly 412 essays this week, and they are about to read yours. But here is the controversial truth that most high school counselors refuse to tell you because it simply hurts too much. Your perfect 4.0 grade point average, your endless list of extracurricular activities, and your exhausting hundreds of volunteer hours mean absolutely nothing if you commit even one of the catastrophic narrative errors we are about to discuss today. Every single year, millions of dollars in private and institutional scholarship funding are left entirely unclaimed, or worse, awarded to applicants with significantly lower academic credentials than you possess. Why does this happen? It happens because brilliant, highly qualified students across the United States are actively self-sabotaging their financial futures through painfully predictable essay mistakes. Let us look at a historical trend that repeats itself every single admission cycle. Consider a case study of two hypothetical applicants representing a very real phenomenon. We will call the first applicant Michael. Michael is the quintessential overachiever. He has perfect advanced placement scores, he is the captain of the varsity debate team, and he has spent his past 3 summers building houses for the underprivileged. He applies for a highly competitive, full-ride merit scholarship. His essay is technically flawless, grammatically perfect, and comprehensively lists every single one of his achievements in chronological order. Then we have the second applicant, Elena. Elena has a solid but entirely unremarkable 3.5 grade point average. She works a part-time, minimum wage job at a local grocery store to help her family pay essential bills, leaving her very little time for prestigious academic clubs or international volunteer trips. She applies for the exact same scholarship. Fast forward 3 months and Michael receives a standard, polite rejection letter. Elena secures the full-ride scholarship, altering the trajectory of her life forever. The difference was not in their resumes, their test scores, or their inherent worth as students. The difference was entirely in their essays. Michael fell into the trap of writing what he thought the committee wanted to hear, inadvertently committing a cardinal sin of narrative structuring that instantly signaled to the reader that he lacked genuine self-awareness and vulnerability. Elena, however, avoided the standard cliches and wrote a compelling, deeply authentic narrative that connected her mundane reality and daily struggles to her future professional potential. In this deep dive masterclass, I am going to reveal the exact opening phrase that admissions officers secretly despise. If you have this specific phrase anywhere in your opening paragraph, your application is effectively dead on arrival, and your carefully crafted essay will be discarded within 20 seconds. But I will not just tell you what to avoid. We are going to reconstruct the exact architecture of a winning scholarship narrative. The problem this video solves for you today is the crippling uncertainty, the writer's block, and the profound financial anxiety that consistently accompanies the United States college application process. We are currently facing a student debt crisis that is paralyzing an entire generation of graduates, making the act of securing free educational funding not just a pleasant bonus, but an absolute, undeniable necessity for your future survival and economic prosperity. You are likely sitting at your desk right now, staring at a blinking cursor on a blank document, paralyzed by an incredibly vague prompt. You are wondering how on earth you are supposed to distill 17 or 18 years of your lived experience into 500 words without sounding arrogant, desperate, or incredibly boring. Today, we are going to completely eliminate that paralysis. I am going to walk you through a microscopic step-by-step deconstruction of the 5 most common, completely avoidable mistakes that routinely disqualify otherwise brilliant United States students from securing $5, $10, and even $50,000 scholarships. We will replace your anxiety with an actionable, data-driven framework. We will analyze specific case studies of essays that failed spectacularly, breaking down the exact sentences and structural missteps where the applicant fundamentally lost the reader's interest. Then we will thoroughly contrast those failures with historical trends of essays that successfully secured massive funding, identifying the structural elements, the pacing, and the rhetorical strategies that you can directly replicate in your own writing process. We are going to dive deep into the psychology of the people reading these essays. You must understand that these scholarship committees are composed of human beings who are experiencing severe fatigue, profound boredom, and natural skepticism. We will teach you how to elegantly bypass their natural defenses and trigger a genuine, memorable emotional response. You will learn how to properly define your personal stakes within the narrative, how to weave your specific academic goals into a much broader societal context, and how to demonstrate authentic leadership potential without ever actually using the tired, overused word leadership. Furthermore, we will treat the Scholarship Foundation not as an anonymous benefactor, but as an investor. These committees are looking for a massive return on their investment. They want to fund students who will go on to reflect brilliantly upon their organization. By the end of this comprehensive session, you will possess a complete diagnostic toolkit. You will be able to look at your current draft, instantly identify the toxic elements that are dragging it down, and surgically remove them. You will know exactly how to pivot from a generic, forgettable narrative into a highly specific, memorable argument for why you represent the absolute best investment for that specific scholarship foundation. This is not about superficial tricks or formatting hacks. This is a masterclass in high-stakes persuasive storytelling. If you are serious about graduating debt-free, if you are exhausted by generic advice that simply tells you to be yourself, and if you are ready to treat your scholarship applications with the rigorous analytical approach of a professional writer, then you are exactly where you need to be. We are going to entirely dismantle the myths, explicitly expose the pitfalls, and rebuild your approach from the ground up, starting immediately with the single most destructive mistake that is currently plaguing 90% of first drafts across the country. Mistake number 1 is what industry professionals refer to as the chronological resume recitation. Let us break down exactly what this looks like and why it systematically destroys your chances of securing funding. When you submit your college or scholarship application, the committee already possesses your academic transcripts. They already have your standardized test scores. They have a completely separate, dedicated section where you have meticulously categorized your extracurricular activities, your leadership positions, and your community service hours. Therefore, when you use your primary essay space to simply regurgitate that exact same information in paragraph form, you are committing the ultimate sin of persuasive writing. You are wasting the evaluator's extremely limited time. Imagine if you walked into a high-stakes corporate job interview, and instead of answering the interviewer's specific questions about your character, your adaptability, and your problem-solving abilities, you simply pulled out your printed resume and read it aloud line by line, from top to bottom. The interviewers would likely terminate the meeting early. Yet, thousands of brilliant United States high school seniors do exactly this in their scholarship essays every single year. They write structurally disastrous sentences explaining that during their sophomore year they joined the debate team, and then in their junior year they became the treasurer of the National Honor Society, which ultimately led to them becoming president in their senior year while simultaneously balancing varsity soccer and a part-time job. This is not a personal narrative. This is an inventory list. Let us look at a specific case study from the early 2026 application cycle to illustrate this phenomenon. Consider a hypothetical student named Christopher from Chicago, Illinois. Christopher is an undeniably exceptional student. He has a flawless grade point average, he serves as the captain of his school's robotics team, and he dedicates his weekends to volunteering at a local animal shelter. Christopher applied for a highly competitive, massive national STEM scholarship. His opening paragraph started by outlining his early childhood interest in building blocks, moved chronologically into his middle school science fair victories, and then detailed every single science-related club he subsequently joined in high school. The historical trend for essays structured in this chronological manner is overwhelmingly negative. The The committee members reading Christopher's essay learned absolutely nothing new about his internal motivations, his personal resilience, or his capacity for complex analytical thought. They only consumed a highly redundant summary of his digital application portal. Consequently, Christopher was passed over for the award, despite his objectively elite qualifications. Now, let us directly contrast this with another 2026 case study. Enter Jessica from Austin, Texas. Jessica applied for the exact same National STEM scholarship. She also possessed an incredibly impressive resume, but she fundamentally understood that the scholarship essay is not meant to show what you did. It is strategically designed to show how you think. Instead of listing her extensive achievements, Jessica utilized a high-retention writing strategy we call the micro-moment framework. She deliberately isolated one specific, seemingly insignificant moment from her junior year. She wrote an entire gripping 500-word essay about a random Tuesday afternoon, when her robotics team's primary circuit board unexpectedly caught fire exactly 3 hours before a major state competition. She did not mention her perfect grade point average. She did not waste word count listing her other club memberships. She hyper-focused entirely on the visceral panic of that specific moment, the immediate triage her team had to perform under extreme duress, the frantic, improvised soldering of wires, and the ultimate profound realization she had about the true nature of engineering failure and collaborative recovery. By zooming in closely on this single micro-moment, Jessica demonstrated incredible problem-solving skills, grace under extreme pressure, and a profound, genuine passion for her chosen field. She painted a vivid sensory picture that allowed the scholarship committee to actually visualize her in action. They could practically smell the burning plastic of the circuit board. They could feel the escalating tension in the classroom. This is the precise difference between merely telling a committee that you are a resilient leader and actually showing them your leadership through a highly specific, contained narrative lens. Potential outcomes for essays that successfully utilize the micro-moment framework are significantly stronger because they inherently bypass the reader's inherent fatigue. You are no longer asking the evaluator to passively process a dry list of data points. You are actively inviting them into a compelling, high-stakes story. To permanently eliminate the chronological resume recitation from your writing process, you must implement a strict, non-negotiable diagnostic rule for yourself right now. Look critically at your current essay draft. If a specific detail, an award, or a club membership already exists anywhere else in your application packet, you must restrict yourself from using it as the primary, driving subject of your essay. You can reference it briefly as necessary contextual background, but it cannot be the central focal point. Your essay must serve as the connective tissue of your entire application. It must clearly answer the elusive question of why. Why do you actually care about robotics? Why did you willingly spend 400 hours volunteering at that specific hospital? What highly specific, transformative conversation did you have in that hospital waiting room that fundamentally altered your perspective on the American healthcare system and solidified your desire to pursue medical research? Historical trends within higher education financing clearly indicate that the most consistently successful applicants treat their essays as a magnifying glass, rather than a wide-angle lens. They zoom in so closely on a highly specific human interaction, a specific operational failure, or a specific intellectual realization that the broader universal truth of their character is suddenly and powerfully illuminated. Executing this effectively requires an immense amount of personal vulnerability and rigorous self-awareness. It is undeniably far easier to hide behind an impressive bulleted list of prestigious accomplishments than it is to articulate the messy, difficult, and often entirely unglamorous process of genuine personal growth. But if you want to secure substantial financial backing and avoid massive student debt in 2026, you cannot afford to take the easy, predictable route. You must be deeply memorable. You must actively force the exhausted reader to stop skimming, lean forward in their office chair, and actually invest their emotional energy into the human being behind the application. But here is where this entire process gets incredibly dangerous. In a desperate attempt to be memorable, to stand out from the crowd, and to explicitly avoid sounding like a boring corporate resume, thousands of well-intentioned students swing the narrative pendulum entirely in the opposite direction. They accurately realize they need a powerful emotional hook, so they dive headfirst into the darkest, most profoundly traumatic experiences of their entire lives, completely misunderstanding the fundamental psychological purpose of the personal statement. They mistakenly believe that whoever can prove they have suffered the most will automatically win the scholarship funds. This leads us directly into mistake number 2, an error so fundamentally devastating that it not only practically guarantees immediate rejection, but often leaves the admissions committee feeling deeply uncomfortable, psychologically burdened, and professionally compromised. You might be actively making this exact catastrophic mistake right now without even realizing it, genuinely thinking you are simply being authentic and vulnerable, when in reality, you are crossing a massive psychological red line that will instantly disqualify you from consideration. Mistake number 2 is universally known among admissions professionals as the unresolved trauma narrative, and it is destroying applications in the 2026 cycle at an unprecedented rate. This catastrophic error occurs when an applicant fundamentally misunderstands the purpose of the adversity prompt. Committees frequently ask about challenges you have overcome, but millions of students misinterpret this as a directive to participate in a competitive suffering contest. They believe that the student who has endured the most profound, agonizing hardship will automatically be awarded the largest financial package. This is a complete myth. Historical trends spanning the last decade of scholarship distributions clearly demonstrate that funding foundations do not award hundreds of thousands of dollars out of pity. They award capital based on demonstrated resilience, intellectual maturity, and the proven capacity to transform negative circumstances into proactive, community-oriented solutions. Imagine if you walked into a coffee shop, sat down next to a complete stranger, and within 30 seconds, they began exclusively detailing the most agonizing, traumatic, and devastatingly sad moments of their entire life, offering absolutely no context, no sense of personal growth, and no positive resolution. You would feel immense sympathy for them, but you would also feel profoundly uncomfortable, emotionally drained, and entirely unequipped to handle that psychological burden. You would look for an immediate exit. This exact psychological phenomenon is called compassion fatigue, and it is precisely what happens to a scholarship evaluator when they read an unresolved trauma narrative. These committee members are reading hundreds of essays a day. When they encounter page after page of relentless tragedy that lacks a definitive pivot toward personal agency, they shut down emotionally. They cannot evaluate your academic potential because they are overwhelmed by your unresolved pain. Let us examine a highly specific case study from the current 2026 application landscape. Consider an applicant named Olivia from Seattle, Washington. Olivia is a brilliant student who unfortunately experienced the sudden, devastating loss of her family home to a fire during her sophomore year. This is a profound tragedy. Olivia applied for a highly competitive, $30,000 National Merit Scholarship. However, her essay dedicated 450 of her allotted 500 words to describing the absolute horror of the fire, the smell of the smoke, the loss of her childhood possessions, and the subsequent months of extreme depression and logistical nightmare her family endured. The essay was beautifully written, objectively heartbreaking, and entirely ineffective. The committee members reading Olivia's essay wept, but they did not fund her. Why? Because after reading her application, they knew absolutely nothing about Olivia the scholar, Olivia the future engineer, or Olivia the campus leader. She trapped the reader in her lowest moment and left them there. She presented herself entirely as a passive victim of horrific circumstance, rather than an active protagonist shaping her own destiny. To properly utilize an adversity narrative, you must immediately implement what professional consultants call the 10-90 rule. This framework dictates that you dedicate an absolute maximum of 10% of your word count to objectively describing the traumatic event or the baseline hardship. The remaining 90% of your essay must be exclusively dedicated to your specific, actionable response to that hardship, the intellectual growth you achieve because of it, and how that specific growth makes you the ideal candidate for their financial investment. Now, let us contrast Olivia with another 2026 case study. Enter David from Miami, Florida. David experienced an equally disruptive hardship when his family was abruptly evicted from their apartment, forcing him to live out of a motel room for 6 months during his junior year. David also applied for a massive national scholarship, but he utilized the 10-90 rule to absolute perfection. His opening paragraph quickly and objectively established the stakes: the cramped motel room, the lack of a quiet study space, and the immediate financial terror. He spent exactly 50 words on the trauma. The remaining 450 words detailed exactly what he did next. He described how he systematically mapped out every public library within a 5-mile radius, creating a comprehensive spreadsheet of their free internet hours. He wrote about how this forced logistical planning ignited a deep fascination with urban infrastructure and public resource allocation. He detailed how he subsequently started a small student-led initiative to collect discarded laptops and distribute them to other housing-insecure students in his district. David did not ask the committee to feel sorry for him. Instead, he forced them to be profoundly impressed by him. He presented his hardship merely as the inciting incident that activated his latent leadership skills and defined his future academic trajectory in urban planning. The potential outcomes for essays structured exactly like David's are exponentially higher because they provide the committee with concrete, undeniable proof of the applicant's future success. If David can organize a community tech initiative while living out of a motel room, the committee can easily visualize the incredible impact he will have when armed with a university laboratory, a massive alumni network, and a $50,000 grant. He transformed his trauma into an undeniable asset. If you are currently writing an essay about a divorce, an illness, a financial crisis, or a personal failure, you must ruthlessly audit your draft right now. Take a physical highlighter and mark every single sentence that describes the pain, the suffering, or the unfairness of the situation. If that highlighted section exceeds one small paragraph, you are self-sabotaging. You must immediately pivot the narrative. You need to identify the specific actionable steps you took to survive, adapt, and eventually thrive. You must articulate the exact new skills you acquired during that dark period. Did you learn extreme time management? Did you develop a profound sense of radical empathy? Did you discover a passion for legal advocacy because you had to translate dense immigration documents for your parents? The hardship itself is entirely irrelevant to the scholarship committee. Your specific intellectual response to the hardship is the only thing they are actually looking to fund. However, once students realize they need to focus on the positive outcome, they frequently overcorrect in a way that is equally destructive. They pivot from personal tragedy directly into profound delusion. They assume that because they overcame a personal hurdle, they must now convince the committee that they are going to single-handedly save the entire world. This leads us directly to mistake number 3, a structural error that instantly strips an applicant of all credibility and makes them sound incredibly naive, arrogant, and entirely disconnected from the realities of their chosen profession. You might think telling the committee about your grand plans to cure a major disease or solve global poverty sounds ambitious, but to the exhausted professional evaluator, it triggers an immediate, insurmountable red flag that guarantees your application goes straight to the bottom of the pile. Mistake number 3 is academically defined as the grandiose savior complex. This occurs when a 17 or 18-year-old student, armed with nothing but a high school diploma and a few advanced placement biology credits, confidently declares to a panel of seasoned professionals that they are going to single-handedly cure a complex neurological disease, eradicate systemic global poverty, or reverse decades of environmental damage within their 4 years of undergraduate study. You might genuinely possess this level of ambition, and society absolutely needs massive ambition, but you must understand the psychological trigger you pull when you submit this type of narrative to a scholarship committee. When an evaluator reads a deeply complex global problem reduced to a simplistic, overly optimistic 500-word solution, they do not see a visionary leader. They see an applicant who is suffering from a profound lack of actual industry knowledge. They see someone who fundamentally disrespects the thousands of brilliant postdoctoral researchers, economists, and engineers who have dedicated their entire adult lives to solving these exact same issues without success. Imagine if you walked into a highly exclusive venture capital firm in Silicon Valley, sat down in front of billionaire investors, and confidently pitched a vague plan to completely replace the entire global financial system using a revolutionary new software architecture. However, when pressed for technical details, you revealed that your only actual coding experience was building a basic calculator application in a high school computer science class. The investors would immediately escort you out of the building. You demonstrated zero understanding of market complexities, regulatory frameworks, or the sheer mathematical scale of the problem. This is exactly how scholarship committees react to grandiose college essays. They are looking for students who understand the microscopic, incremental nature of genuine progress. Historical trends in scholarship allocation heavily favor pragmatic, localized action over theoretical, global daydreaming. Let us deeply analyze a very specific 2026 case study that perfectly illustrates this catastrophic miscalculation. Consider an applicant named Matthew from Boston, Massachusetts. Matthew is deeply passionate about environmental conservation and applied for a lucrative $50,000 sustainability grant. His essay was a sweeping, dramatic manifesto about how he was going to invent a revolutionary carbon capture technology that would completely reverse global warming by the year 2040. He used massive, sweeping statements about saving the planet and leading a global revolution. The essay was entirely theoretical. Matthew had never actually built a physical prototype of anything. He had never worked in a laboratory environment. He had never even organized a local park cleanup in his own neighborhood. The evaluators reading Matthew's application immediately flagged it as immature. The potential outcomes for essays constructed around massive, unproven theories are historically terrible because they require the committee to take an enormous, unjustified leap of faith. Matthew was ultimately rejected because his massive claims were entirely untethered from his actual, proven reality. Now, we will contrast Matthew's spectacular failure with a triumphant 2026 success story. Enter Sarah from Denver, Colorado. Sarah applied for the exact same prestigious environmental sustainability grant. She also cared deeply about climate change, but instead of trying to save the entire planet in 500 words, she utilized a powerful, highly effective structural technique known as the hyper-local impact strategy. Sarah did not write about global atmospheric carbon levels. She wrote exclusively about the cafeteria waste management system at her specific public high school in Denver. She detailed exactly how she spent 3 months physically auditing the trash cans in the school cafeteria, meticulously documenting the exact tonnage of wasted organic material. She described the incredibly frustrating bureaucratic process of presenting her data to the local school board. She explained how she faced initial rejection from the administration, how she had to adjust her proposal to meet strict municipal budget constraints, and how she eventually secured a tiny $200 grant from the Parent-Teacher Association to launch a pilot composting program. By the end of her senior year, her localized program had successfully diverted 3 tons of food waste from the local county landfill. Notice the profound difference in these two approaches. Sarah did not promise to save the world. She promised to solve one highly specific, deeply unglamorous problem in her immediate physical vicinity. But by doing so, she provided the scholarship committee with undeniable, empirical evidence of her ability to execute a complex vision. She demonstrated an advanced understanding of logistics, budget management, bureaucratic navigation, and practical problem solving. The committee did not have to guess if Sarah was capable of managing a large environmental project. She had already proven it on a micro scale. They enthusiastically awarded her the $50,000 grant because she represented a highly secure, data-backed investment. If your current essay draft contains sweeping declarations about changing the world, revolutionizing an entire industry, or solving a massive geopolitical crisis, you must immediately delete those sentences. You must aggressively scale down your narrative scope. You must identify the smallest possible iteration of your grand vision and focus your entire essay on your practical engagement with that specific micro-problem. If you want to cure cancer, write about the specific empathy you learned while volunteering at the front desk of a local oncology ward. If you want to reform the criminal justice system, write about the specific logistical challenges you faced while organizing a book drive for a local juvenile detention center. You must prove your competence in the shallow end of the pool before the committee will ever fund your dive into the deep end. By narrowing your scope, eliminating your resume recitation, and framing your hardships as catalysts for actionable growth, you are now building a narrative foundation that is mathematically superior to 95% of your direct competition. Your structure is finally solid. Your themes are finally grounded in reality. But this structural perfection will instantly collapse into a pile of unreadable garbage if you fall victim to the fourth mistake. This next error is an insidious linguistic trap that high school English teachers have accidentally been training you to commit for the past 4 years. In a desperate attempt to sound intelligent, mature, and academically rigorous, students completely abandon their natural speaking voice and don a bizarre robotic disguise that makes their essays physically painful to read. You are about to discover why the digital thesaurus tool on your computer is actually the most dangerous weapon you can possibly use against your own financial future, and how a single misused vocabulary word can completely shatter the fragile illusion of your authenticity. Mistake number 4 is formally categorized by professional writing consultants as forced thesaurus syndrome, and it is entirely responsible for transforming thousands of compelling personal narratives into unreadable, robotic disasters every single admission cycle. You have spent the last 4 years being systematically conditioned by the United States public education system to equate complex vocabulary with high intelligence. You have been taught to memorize obscure, archaic words for your standardized college entrance exams. Your advanced placement literature teachers have heavily penalized you for using simple verbs and common adjectives. Therefore, when you finally sit down to write the most important personal essay of your young adult life, your immediate instinct is to open a digital thesaurus, highlight every single normal word in your document, and replace it with the longest, most convoluted synonym you can possibly find. You genuinely believe this will make you sound like a sophisticated, elite scholar capable of handling rigorous university coursework. In reality, it achieves the exact opposite effect. When you artificially inflate your vocabulary, you completely obliterate your natural speaking voice. You create a jarring, unnatural cadence that immediately signals to the professional evaluator that you are trying incredibly hard to be someone you are not. You must remember the specific psychological state of the person reading your application in the year 2026. They are sitting in a fluorescent-lit office, they have been reading essays for 7 consecutive hours, and they are desperately searching for a genuine human connection. Imagine if you were sitting across a table from a trusted mentor, attempting to explain a moment of profound personal failure. You would never look them directly in the eyes and state that you utilized an aggregation of multifaceted paradigms to circumvent the deleterious ramifications of your inadequacy. That sentence is technically grammatically correct, but it is entirely devoid of human emotion. It creates a massive barrier of artificiality between you and the listener. Instead, you would simply look at your mentor and say that you realized you made a massive mistake, you asked your community for help, and you tried a completely different approach. The first sentence is incredibly alienating. The second sentence is deeply authentic, vulnerable, and instantly relatable. Let us deeply analyze a specific case study from the early 2026 application season to demonstrate exactly how this destroys an application. Consider an applicant named Ryan from Columbus, Ohio. Ryan is an exceptional student aiming for a highly lucrative pre-law scholarship endowment. He decided to write his primary narrative about his intense experiences as the lead attorney on his high school mock trial team. Ryan had a fantastic underlying story about losing a major state case due to a lack of preparation, which subsequently taught him the critical importance of exhaustive, meticulous research. However, Ryan fell completely into the forced thesaurus syndrome trap. Instead of simply stating that his lack of preparation caused him to lose the case, his opening paragraph declared that his egregious deficiency in comprehensive evidentiary assimilation precipitated a catastrophic nullification of his jurisprudential aspirations. When the scholarship committee encountered Ryan's essay, they did not marvel at his expansive vocabulary. They physically cringed. Every single time the evaluator had to mentally pause to translate his absurdly dense jargon back into standard English, the emotional momentum of the story was entirely broken. Ryan effectively forced the committee to constantly stop and consult a mental dictionary, which completely ruined the pacing of his narrative. More importantly, his reliance on massive words suggested a profound lack of confidence in the actual substance of his story. He tried to hide a relatively simple, powerful lesson behind a wall of manufactured intellectualism. The historical trends for essays written in this hyperinflated style are exceptionally poor. Ryan was rejected not because his story was weak, but because his delivery was entirely unreadable. Now, let us directly contrast Ryan's failure with a phenomenal 2026 case study. Enter Chloe from Atlanta, Georgia. Chloe applied for the exact same pre-law scholarship endowment. Instead of writing about a prestigious academic club, Chloe wrote her essay about her weekend job working as a waitress at her family's incredibly busy, understaffed diner. Chloe implicitly understood the immense power of cognitive fluency. Cognitive fluency is a well-documented psychological principle stating that the human brain subconsciously equates the ease of processing information with truth, credibility, and intelligence. The easier your essay is to read, the more the evaluator will instinctively trust you. Chloe completely banned the use of a thesaurus during her drafting process. She relied entirely on sharp, simple, highly active verbs and concrete sensory details. She wrote about wiping down the sticky laminate counters at 6 in the morning. She described the exact tone of voice a frustrated truck driver used when his coffee was cold, and she detailed the specific, empathetic de-escalation techniques she utilized to calm him down, secure a generous tip, and turn a hostile interaction into a moment of genuine human connection. She explicitly connected these everyday de-escalation skills to the exact mediation and conflict resolution skills required of a successful corporate attorney. Chloe's essay was exceptionally easy to read. It flowed with the natural rhythmic pacing of a professional fiction novel. The evaluators did not have to struggle to understand her points. They were simply swept away by the narrative momentum. Her simple, direct language conveyed an immense amount of quiet confidence. She did not need to hide behind five-syllable words because her actual lived experience and her analytical insights were genuinely profound. The committee awarded Chloe the scholarship because she communicated complex, mature themes using accessible, deeply human language. She proved her intelligence through the clarity of her thought process, not the obscurity of her vocabulary. To permanently eradicate this mistake from your application strategy, you must immediately implement a strict diagnostic tool, known as the audio verification protocol. You cannot simply read your essay silently on your computer screen because your brain will automatically gloss over the clunky, unnatural phrasing. You must print your essay on physical paper, stand up in your room, and read the entire document out loud at a normal conversational volume. If you find yourself physically stumbling over a specific sentence, or if you run out of breath before reaching the end of a thought, that sentence is fundamentally broken. If a specific word feels strange in your mouth, or if you would feel deeply embarrassed saying that exact word out loud to your closest friends, you must delete it immediately and replace it with the simplest, most direct alternative available. You must ruthlessly hunt down and eliminate adverbs. You must replace passive voice constructions with sharp, active verbs. You must understand that the most powerful, persuasive writing in the English language is almost always the most direct. You are writing to connect with another human being, not to prove that you swallowed a dictionary. By simplifying your language, you drastically reduce the cognitive load on the exhausted evaluator, allowing the true brilliance of your personal story to finally shine through without any artificial obstruction. However, even if you execute the structural scope perfectly, eliminate the resume recitation, properly frame your adversity, and utilize crisp conversational language, your entire application can still be instantly destroyed in the final 50 words. You can do everything right for 450 words, building a magnificent, compelling argument for your future success, only to completely detonate your credibility in the conclusion paragraph. This brings us to mistake number 5, the silent killer of American scholarship applications. It involves a fundamental psychological misunderstanding of the actual relationship between the applicant and the funding foundation. The vast majority of high school students use their final paragraph to inadvertently flip the power dynamic, completely abandoning their position of strength and transitioning into a position of desperate weakness. They commit an error so subtly catastrophic that they usually do not even realize they are actively begging until the rejection letter arrives in the mail. Let us thoroughly dissect exactly why your conclusion paragraph is currently failing, and how you must reconstruct it to ensure maximum potential outcomes. Mistake number 5 is known in philanthropic circles as the charity fallacy, and it is the single most tragic way to destroy a perfectly constructed application. You have spent 4 paragraphs establishing your intellectual rigor, demonstrating your resilience, and proving your localized community impact. You have positioned yourself as a highly capable future leader. But then panic sets in as you approach the final 50 words. You suddenly remember the staggering cost of tuition in the year 2026. You think about the crippling interest rates on federal student loans. Driven by very real, completely understandable financial terror, you unconsciously shift your tone. You abandon the confident, analytical voice of a future professional and adopt the desperate tone of a beggar. You write sentences explicitly stating how much you need the money, how your parents cannot afford your tuition, or how receiving this award would be a dream come true. You plead, you ask for a favor, and in doing so, you completely obliterate the professional power dynamic you just spent 400 words carefully building. Imagine if you walked into the boardroom of a massive venture capital firm. You deliver a flawless, deeply researched 20-minute presentation on a revolutionary new medical device. The investors are completely captivated. They are running the numbers in their heads, projecting massive market growth, and they are eagerly reaching for their checkbooks. But instead of concluding your presentation by reiterating the massive return on investment they will receive by funding your company, you suddenly drop your shoulders, look at the floor, and quietly say that you really need this capital because your rent is due on Tuesday and your car just broke down. The investors would immediately freeze. Their confidence in you as a leader would vanish instantly. They are not running a charity. They are running an investment fund. When you ask for pity, you instantly signal that you do not believe the inherent value of your work is enough to secure the funding on its own merits. This exact psychological shift happens every single day in scholarship committee rooms across the United States. Foundations and university endowments are not charities in the traditional sense. They are highly strategic investment vehicles. When an organization awards a student $50,000, they are fundamentally purchasing a tiny fraction of that student's future success. They want to fund the next prominent surgeon, the next innovative engineer, or the next transformative educator, because when that student inevitably achieves greatness, the foundation gets to put that student's face on their annual report and proudly declare that they recognize that brilliance first. They are looking for a partnership, not a rescue mission. Let us look at a highly detailed case study from the recent 2026 application cycle to illustrate this devastating misstep. Consider an applicant named Emily from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Emily applied for a highly competitive public health endowment. Her essay was structurally flawless. She utilized the micro-moment framework beautifully, writing a gripping narrative about organizing a localized vaccination awareness drive in her specific neighborhood. She avoided the forced thesaurus syndrome, writing with crisp, conversational clarity. The evaluators were completely sold on Emily. She was exactly the type of pragmatic, driven student they wanted to represent their organization. But then they reached Emily's final paragraph. Instead of projecting her localized success into a compelling vision for her future university studies, Emily panicked. Her conclusion read, "I humbly ask that you select me for this prestigious award. My family has experienced significant financial hardship over the last 3 years, and without your generous support, my dream of attending a 4-year university will simply be impossible. Please help me make my parents proud." The evaluators reading this conclusion experienced an immediate visceral deflation. Emily entirely stripped away her agency. She framed the scholarship as a life raft required for her basic survival, rather than a rocket ship designed to accelerate her already proven momentum. The historical trends for applications ending on a note of financial desperation are shockingly poor, even for needs-based scholarships. The committee requires the applicant to demonstrate financial need through official tax documents and standardized federal forms. They do not want to read about it in the personal narrative. Emily unfortunately did not receive the endowment because her conclusion fundamentally undercut her established competence, making her appear like a financial liability rather than a strategic asset. Now we must completely reconstruct your approach to the conclusion by analyzing a triumphant 2026 case study. Enter Jacob from Phoenix, Arizona. Jacob applied for the exact same public health endowment. His essay was also brilliant, detailing his work analyzing extreme heat protocols for outdoor laborers in his city. But Jacob implicitly understood the psychology of the investor. He knew he had to end his essay from a position of absolute strength. He completely banned the words need, hope, and dream from his final paragraph. Jacob's conclusion did not ask for a favor. It proposed a highly strategic partnership. He wrote, "My localized research in Phoenix has clearly demonstrated the urgent need for scalable heat mitigation strategies in urban centers. As I transition into the public health program at the university, I am actively expanding my data models to encompass national labor trends. Your endowment will directly fund the proprietary software licenses and field research travel required to finalize this expanded framework by my junior year. Together, we can fundamentally shift the occupational safety standards for millions of American workers." Notice the breathtaking difference in the power dynamic. Jacob never mentions tuition costs. He never talks about his parents or his personal financial anxiety. He treats the scholarship committee exactly like a board of investors. He tells them exactly what their capital will purchase. He clearly outlines the specific, tangible deliverables he will generate using their money. He uses the word together, subconsciously linking his future inevitable success with their financial contribution. When the evaluators read Jacob's conclusion, they did not feel pity. They felt a profound sense of urgency. They felt that if they did not fund Jacob immediately, another foundation would swoop in and steal this incredible investment opportunity. They enthusiastically awarded him the full endowment. To implement this strategy in your own writing, you must aggressively audit your final paragraph right now. You must physically delete any sentence that references your inability to pay for college. That data belongs on your free application for federal student aid, not in your personal statement. You must replace every desperate plea with a confident, forward-looking projection of your specific academic timeline. You must articulate exactly how their specific funding will accelerate your specific research, your specific community project, or your specific professional certification. You must make them feel that your success is absolutely inevitable with or without them, but that their financial contribution will significantly speed up the timeline of your impact. You now possess the complete, comprehensive diagnostic toolkit to identify and eliminate the 5 most common, universally destructive structural mistakes that ruin thousands of brilliant scholarship essays every single year. You know how to narrow your scope, highlight actionable resilience, avoid grandiose delusions, speak with cognitive fluency, and command the narrative power dynamic. If you systematically apply these frameworks, your essay will rank highly among all submissions in the country based on historical grading rubrics. However, eliminating negative mistakes is only half of the architectural equation. To truly ensure that the evaluator fights for your application in the final committee selection room, you must actively inject a specific psychological trigger into your writing. There is a hidden, highly secretive grading metric that no university or foundation ever publicly publishes on their official website. Yet every single admissions officer subconsciously uses it to separate the great essays from the truly unforgettable ones. If you fail to answer this one invisible prompt, your technically perfect essay will still be completely forgotten by lunchtime. We must now pivot from defensive writing strategies into highly aggressive, offensive persuasion tactics, starting directly with the concept of narrative velocity. The concept of narrative velocity is the secret metric that dictates whether your essay is passively consumed or actively championed by an admissions officer. To understand this invisible prompt, you must first understand the physics of a highly persuasive personal statement. Most essays submitted in the current 2026 application cycle operate entirely on potential energy. They describe a student who is sitting perfectly still, possessing great grades and noble intentions, waiting for the scholarship foundation to provide the spark that will finally put them into motion. These students write extensively about what they want to do, what they hope to achieve, and what they plan to accomplish once they arrive on a university campus. They are entirely stationary. Narrative velocity, however, is the literary equivalent of kinetic energy. It is the undeniable sensation that the applicant is already moving at a breathtaking speed, and the scholarship funds are simply the necessary fuel to accelerate an engine that is already running hot. The invisible prompt that every evaluator is subconsciously trying to answer is this: if we do not give this student our money, will they succeed anyway? If your essay makes the committee feel that your success is absolutely inevitable regardless of their intervention, your potential outcomes for securing that funding skyrocket exponentially. Imagine if you are standing on a train platform, holding a massive briefcase full of investment capital. You are looking for a conductor to invest in. You see one conductor sitting on a bench, holding a beautifully drawn map, talking eloquently about how amazing the destination will be once someone gives him the money to buy a train. Then you look down the tracks and see a second conductor. This conductor has already built a rudimentary engine out of scrap metal. They have laid 50 feet of track with their bare hands, and the train is currently inching forward, slowly but unstoppably. Which conductor do you hand the briefcase to? You hand it to the person who is already in motion. Scholarship committees operate on the exact same psychological principle. They are terrified of investing in static potential. They desperately want to invest in kinetic momentum. Let us deeply analyze a specific case study from the 2026 cycle that perfectly illustrates the fatal lack of narrative velocity. Consider an applicant named Thomas from Seattle, Washington. Thomas applied for a massive civic engineering scholarship. His academic record was pristine. His essay was a deeply philosophical, beautifully articulated meditation on the importance of sustainable urban infrastructure and the moral imperative of affordable public housing. He spent 400 words elegantly describing the theoretical concepts of urban density and quoting famous 20th century city planners. However, Thomas possessed zero narrative velocity. He had never actually participated in a habitat building project. He had never attended a local city council meeting to observe municipal zoning debates. He had never even organized a neighborhood trash cleanup. His entire essay was an intellectual exercise occurring completely inside his own head. Historical trends regarding highly theoretical stationary essays show that they are consistently passed over for funding. The committee read Thomas's essay, agreed with his philosophy, and promptly placed his application in the rejection pile because they had no empirical proof that Thomas possessed the grit required to actually build anything in the physical world. Now we must contrast Thomas with a textbook example of massive narrative velocity. Enter Samantha from Detroit, Michigan, applying in the exact same 2026 cycle for the exact same civic engineering endowment. Samantha also cared deeply about urban renewal, but instead of writing a philosophical dissertation, she documented her kinetic energy. Her essay detailed a highly specific, grueling 6-month period during her junior year when she decided to transform an abandoned, trash-filled dirt lot on her street into a functional community garden. She did not write about the theory of community building. She wrote about the frustrating reality of it. She detailed how she spent weeks navigating the labyrinth of the Detroit Municipal Code to find the legal owner of the lot. She described the exact spreadsheet she used to track her cold calls to local hardware stores, begging for donated lumber and soil. She wrote about the Saturday morning it rained, and she was the only person who showed up to clear the heavy, wet debris, forcing her to work alone in the mud for 8 hours. By the time the scholarship evaluator finished reading Samantha's essay, they were completely out of breath. The narrative velocity was overwhelming. Samantha was not waiting for permission to be a civic engineer. She was already acting as one within the absolute limits of her current high school resources. The committee did not have to guess if Samantha had the resilience to survive a rigorous university engineering program. She had already proven she could survive municipal bureaucracy and physical exhaustion. She triggered a profound sense of institutional fear of missing out within the evaluation room. The committee realized that Samantha was a high-speed train rapidly leaving the station, and if they wanted their foundation's name attached to her inevitable future success, they needed to write the check immediately. They awarded her the maximum possible endowment. To permanently inject this massive kinetic energy into your own writing, you must immediately perform a rigorous diagnostic verb audit on your current draft. You need to physically highlight every single verb you use to describe your own actions. If your page is covered in cognitive, passive verbs like pondered, realized, thought, believed, observed, or hoped, your essay is completely stationary. You are trapped in your own head. You must aggressively revise your narrative to center around active, physical verbs. You must rewrite your sentences so that you are the one who initiated, constructed, negotiated, organized, drafted, executed, and delivered. You must show the committee the specific friction you encountered when you collided with the real world, and exactly how you maintained your forward momentum despite that friction. You must adopt the mindset of an agile software developer utilizing rapid prototyping. The scholarship committee does not expect a 17-year-old to have built a multinational corporation, but they absolutely expect you to have built a prototype of your future ambition. If you want to study political science, your prototype is running a highly organized local voter registration drive. If you want to study finance, your prototype is managing the actual budget of a massive high school charity event and demonstrating a mathematically proven return on investment. You must document the messy, complicated prototyping phase of your life. This is the only empirical way to prove your narrative velocity and transition from a risky charitable donation into a highly secure, data-backed institutional investment. However, possessing incredible narrative velocity is completely useless if you are speeding aggressively in the absolute wrong direction. You can build a magnificent, high-speed narrative engine, but if the committee senses even a microscopic disconnect between your proven past actions and your stated future major, they will instantly derail your application. This brings us directly to a catastrophic structural failure that occurs when an applicant tries to force a connection that simply does not exist. It is a psychological misalignment so jarring that it immediately breaks the reader's trust and makes your entire application feel like a calculated fabrication. We must now dissect the immense danger of the academic disconnect and precisely how you can engineer a bulletproof, logical bridge between the person you have been and the professional you are claiming you want to become. The immense danger of the academic disconnect, and precisely how you can engineer a bulletproof, logical bridge between the person you have been and the professional you are claiming you want to become. This disconnect represents a profound psychological chasm in your application. It happens when your entire documented history, your extracurricular activities, your volunteer hours, and the core narrative of your essay point entirely in one specific direction, but your declared major and the specific scholarship you are applying for point in an entirely different, completely unrelated direction. The scholarship committee is looking at your application as a predictive algorithm. They are using your past behavior as the primary data set to predict your future success in their specific field. When those two data sets do not align, the algorithm breaks. The committee immediately assumes one of two highly damaging things. Either you are deeply confused about what you actually want to do with your life, or far worse, you are simply lying to secure the most lucrative funding available. Imagine if you walked into a commercial bank to secure a massive small business loan. You sit down with the loan officer and passionately present a comprehensive, highly detailed business plan to open a high-end, fine dining French restaurant in the heart of the city. You ask for $500,000. But when the loan officer looks at your actual resume, they see that for the past 10 years, You have worked exclusively as an automotive mechanic specializing in diesel engines. You have never worked in a kitchen, you have never managed a hospitality staff, and you have never ordered commercial food supplies. Even if your restaurant business plan is theoretically brilliant, the bank will instantly deny your loan. They cannot bridge the gap between your established automotive past and your proposed culinary future. The risk is simply too high. Scholarship evaluators operate with the exact same risk aversion when reading your essays. Let us look at a highly specific case study from the 2026 application cycle to illustrate this catastrophic failure. Consider an applicant named William from Chicago, Illinois. William applied for an incredibly prestigious, highly competitive pre-medical endowment designed to fund future cardiothoracic surgeons. William was a phenomenal high school student, but his entire life had been dedicated to the performing arts. He was the star of every high school musical, the president of the drama club, and he spent his summers directing community theater productions for local children. In his essay, William wrote a beautiful, moving narrative about the thrill of performing on stage and the empathy he learned by embodying different characters. Then, in the final paragraph, he abruptly stated that this empathy is exactly why he wants to be a heart surgeon. The Medical Scholarship Committee rejected William almost instantly. They did not doubt his empathy, but they saw a massive, insurmountable academic disconnect. Being a heart surgeon requires hundreds of hours of grueling, highly technical laboratory work, a profound obsession with organic chemistry, and the ability to function under extreme clinical pressure. William provided absolutely zero empirical evidence that he possessed any interest in the biological sciences or the mechanical realities of modern medicine. He expected the committee to blindly trust that his passion for musical theater would magically translate into a passion for cutting open human chests. Historical trends unequivocally show that funding foundations will never take that leap of faith. They viewed his application as a calculated attempt by an art student to grab a highly lucrative medical scholarship simply because it offered more money. To prevent this devastating rejection, you must master a sophisticated narrative engineering technique known as the skill translation matrix. You cannot change your past, and you should never lie about your true high school interests, but you must actively and logically translate the vocabulary of your past experiences into the professional vocabulary of your future major. You must build a highly visible, undeniable bridge. Let us deeply analyze a triumphant 2026 case study to see exactly how this bridge is built. Enter Maria from Houston, Texas. Maria also applied for the exact same prestigious pre-medical endowment as William. Astonishingly, Maria also had a high school resume completely dominated by the arts. She was a competitive classical pianist who spent 4 hours every single day practicing intensely. She had zero traditional medical volunteering hours because she was always in the music practice room. However, Maria implicitly understood the danger of the academic disconnect, and she systematically engineered a brilliant narrative bridge. Maria did not write a generic essay about how much she loved music. She wrote a highly technical, hyper-focused essay about the biomechanics of the human hand. She detailed a specific micro-moment during her sophomore year, when she developed severe tendinitis from over-practicing a complex Chopin etude. Instead of just resting, she described how she became completely obsessed with the musculoskeletal structure of her own fingers. She detailed how she began reading advanced orthopedic journals to understand her injury, how she entirely reconstructed her piano technique based on ergonomic science, and how she subsequently started hosting specialized workshops for other young musicians in Houston to prevent repetitive strain injuries. She explicitly linked the microscopic motor control, the obsessive attention to physical detail, and the rigorous daily discipline required to play classical piano at an elite level directly to the exact physical and mental stamina required for neurosurgery. By the time the medical committee finished reading Maria's essay, they did not see a distracted musician. They saw a future surgical prodigy who already understood human anatomy on a visceral, deeply personal level. She successfully translated the soft skills of her artistic background into the hard, undeniable prerequisites of the medical field. The committee eagerly awarded her the full endowment because she eliminated their risk by proving her logical trajectory. If your current essay draft relies heavily on a hobby, a sport, or an extracurricular activity that is not traditionally aligned with your declared major, you must immediately audit your narrative. You cannot simply list the activity and hope the committee figures out the connection. You must spoon-feed them the translation. If you are applying for a computer science scholarship but your main activity is playing varsity basketball, you must not write about teamwork or leadership, because those are generic cliches. Instead, you must write about your obsession with statistical analysis, detailing exactly how you systematically tracked advanced player metrics, mapped court spacing geometry, and utilized data-driven strategies to optimize your team's offensive efficiency. You are translating the physical game of basketball into the analytical language of a data scientist. If you are applying for an architecture scholarship but your primary background is in debate, you must write about the structural engineering of a flawless argument. You must describe how you construct rhetorical foundations, how you build load-bearing evidence to support your claims, and how you design persuasive frameworks that can withstand aggressive cross-examination. You must force the committee to see the underlying architecture of your mind, proving that whether you are working with concrete or with words, your brain fundamentally operates like a master builder. By meticulously engineering this bridge, you completely neutralize the algorithm. You transform perceived weaknesses into highly unique, memorable strengths. You prove to the committee that you are not a confused applicant grasping at random funding, but rather a deeply complex, multifaceted scholar who brings a highly unique, cross-disciplinary perspective to their specific field. You have now established a flawless narrative structure, eliminated all resume recitation, commanded the power dynamic, injected massive kinetic velocity, and logically bridged your past to your future. Your essay is mathematically engineered to secure funding. However, right before you hit the submit button, there is one final, incredibly subtle psychological trap that ruins thousands of technically perfect essays at the absolute last second. It is a fundamental failure of perspective that instantly alienates the reader and makes the applicant sound completely disconnected from reality. We must now explore the devastating impact of the empathy void, and exactly how you can ensure your final draft does not accidentally insult the very people you are asking for money. The devastating impact of the empathy void occurs when an applicant fundamentally lacks the self-awareness to realize how their specific lived experience sounds to someone outside of their own socioeconomic bubble. It happens when a well-intentioned high school student writes an essay that inadvertently objectifies the struggles of marginalized communities, weaponizes someone else's genuine poverty for personal gain, or dramatically complains about a trivial inconvenience, as if it were a profound, insurmountable tragedy. The scholarship evaluators reading these applications come from vastly diverse backgrounds. Many of them fought their way out of generational poverty. When they encounter an essay that completely lacks structural empathy, they do not just reject the application. They feel personally insulted by the applicant's profound ignorance of the real world. Imagine if you were working 50 hours a week at a physically demanding minimum wage job just to keep your electricity from being shut off. Now imagine a wealthy corporate executive walking up to you and passionately complaining about the severe emotional distress they experienced when their luxury yacht required unexpected engine repairs, forcing them to fly commercial to their private island. You would feel a visceral sense of disgust. You would immediately recognize that this person is entirely disconnected from the baseline reality of human survival. This exact dynamic plays out thousands of times every single application cycle, when privileged students attempt to write about adversity or community service without employing a rigorous filter of self-awareness. Let us intensely analyze a highly specific case study from the 2026 application cycle to demonstrate exactly what the empathy void looks like in practice. Consider an applicant named Alexander from a highly affluent suburb in Connecticut. Alexander applied for a massive civic leadership grant. To prove his dedication to global service, he centered his essay entirely on a 2-week volunteer trip his parents purchased for him to build a school in a developing nation. This is a classic narrative trap known in admissions circles as the volunteerism epiphany. Alexander wrote extensively about how shocking it was to see people living without reliable electricity or running water. He vividly described the smiling faces of the impoverished children who played soccer with him in the dirt. Then, he delivered his catastrophic conclusion. He stated that interacting with these incredibly poor but happy children fundamentally changed his perspective, teaching him to be immensely grateful for his large house, his fast internet, and his expensive car back in the United States. When the scholarship committee read Alexander's essay, they were completely repulsed. Alexander thought he was demonstrating immense personal growth and global awareness. In reality, he communicated a deeply toxic, condescending worldview. He reduced an entire community of complex human beings facing systemic, generational poverty into mere props for his own personal enlightenment. He treated their daily survival as a museum exhibit designed to teach him a valuable lesson about his own immense wealth. He demonstrated zero understanding of the geopolitical forces driving that poverty, and he offered absolutely no actionable plan to dismantle those systems. The historical trends for this specific type of savior narrative are violently negative. Applications that rely on the objectification of marginalized groups for emotional leverage are routinely discarded within the first 30 seconds of review. The committee viewed Alexander as an arrogant tourist, not a future civic leader, and his application was immediately permanently disqualified. Now we must contrast Alexander's massive failure with a phenomenal 2026 case study that successfully navigated a very similar cross-cultural experience. Enter Benjamin from Portland, Oregon. Benjamin also applied for the exact same civic leadership grant, and he also participated in a high school construction trip to a lower-income community. However, Benjamin completely avoided the empathy void by turning the critical lens entirely inward. He did not write about how he went to save a desperate community. Instead, he wrote an incredibly vulnerable, highly self-deprecating essay about his own profound uselessness. Benjamin detailed a specific micro-moment on the construction site where he was tasked with mixing industrial concrete. He described his absolute physical failure, his exhaustion, and his inability to follow basic manual instructions. He then wrote about an elderly local woman, a resident of the community he was supposedly there to help, who gently pushed him aside, grabbed the shovel, and flawlessly mixed the heavy concrete with decades of practiced precision. Benjamin centered his entire essay on the profound humiliation and immediate humbling he experienced in that exact moment. He realized that his high grade point average and his expensive private education meant absolutely nothing in the face of true practical survival skills. He explicitly stated that the community did not need his theoretical leadership. They needed him to shut up, listen to the local experts, and carry the heavy bags of cement exactly where he was told. Benjamin connected this specific realization directly to his future goals in public administration. He argued that true civic leadership is not about parachuting into a community and imposing outside solutions. It is about identifying the brilliant, capable leaders who already exist within that community and simply providing them with the necessary structural funding to execute their own vision. The potential outcomes for essays constructed with this level of radical self-awareness are historically exceptional. By exposing his own incompetence and elevating the dignity of the local community, Benjamin proved to the committee that he possessed the mature, collaborative empathy required to navigate complex societal issues. They enthusiastically awarded him the grant because he demonstrated the exact psychological profile of an effective modern leader. To ensure your essay does not accidentally fall into the empathy void, you must subject your final draft to a brutal diagnostic process, known as the subject reversal audit. You must print your essay and read it from the exact perspective of the most vulnerable person mentioned in your narrative. If you wrote about serving food at a homeless shelter, you must read your essay through the eyes of the person receiving that food. Would they feel respected by your words? Would they recognize themselves as a dignified, complex human being in your narrative? Or would they feel like a pitiful caricature utilized solely to make you look like a generous hero? If you sense even a microscopic hint of condescension, pity, or unearned savior complexity, you must completely tear the narrative down and rebuild it. You must aggressively scrub your vocabulary of any language that creates an artificial hierarchy between you and the people you are describing. You must entirely eliminate phrases that suggest you were shocked to discover that people in difficult circumstances are capable of joy, intelligence, or agency. True empathy requires you to understand that adversity does not strip a person of their humanity. When you write about interacting with people facing severe challenges, your focus must remain entirely on the systemic issues creating the hardship or on your own internal logistical failures, never on the perceived emotional simplicity of the victims. You have now mastered the structural psychology of the perfect American scholarship essay. You have eliminated the chronological resume recitation, optimized the 1090 adversity rule, destroyed the grandiose savior complex, eradicated forced thesaurus syndrome, and commanded the investor power dynamic. You have engineered massive narrative velocity and logically bridged your past to your future while maintaining bulletproof structural empathy. Your essay is a masterpiece of persuasive writing, but this entire painstaking process will be rendered completely useless if you fail to navigate the invisible, terrifying technological barrier that stands between your submitted application and the human evaluator. In the year 2026, your essay must first survive a ruthless, entirely automated gatekeeper that is currently destroying thousands of brilliant, honest students. We must now expose the terrifying reality of institutional algorithmic screening. and exactly how a single microscopic formatting error can trigger a false positive that permanently blacklists your name from every major university endowment in the country. The terrifying reality of institutional algorithmic screening is that in the current 2026 application cycle, human eyes are rarely the first to evaluate your deeply personal narrative. We are operating in an era of unprecedented application volume. Major university endowments and national private foundations are receiving upwards of 100,000 applications for a single financial award. To manage this staggering logistical nightmare, these institutions have entirely integrated advanced applicant tracking systems and highly aggressive artificial intelligence detection software into their primary submission portals. These digital gatekeepers are entirely devoid of human empathy. They do not care about your traumatic background, your localized community impact, or your brilliant narrative velocity. They are mathematical filters programmed with ruthless binary parameters designed specifically to cull 50% of the application pool before a human evaluator even pours their morning coffee. If you do not understand the mechanical architecture of these screening algorithms, your meticulously crafted essay will trigger a silent false positive, sending your application directly into a digital incinerator without any notification or right to appeal. Imagine if you spent 6 months meticulously planning an intricate bank heist. You perfectly memorize the guard rotations, you acquire the exact blueprints of the vault, and you successfully bypass every single laser security system. But when you finally arrive at the ultimate titanium door, you realize the keypad requires a highly specific, 6-digit numerical code, and you only brought a set of physical lockpicks. Your brilliant preparation is rendered completely useless because you fundamentally misunderstood the interface of the barrier in front of you. This is exactly what happens when brilliant students submit their essays using unreadable file formats, bizarre typography, or artificially smoothed sentence structures. They attempt to pick a digital lock with an emotional narrative, and the algorithm simply rejects their input as corrupted data. Let us deeply analyze a devastating case study from the early months of the 2026 scholarship season. Consider an applicant named Daniel from Orlando, Florida. Daniel applied for an incredibly lucrative $80,000 national technology grant. His core narrative was phenomenal. He utilized every single structural framework we have discussed in this masterclass. He demonstrated kinetic energy, he logically bridged his past to his future, and he maintained bulletproof structural empathy. However, Daniel wanted his application to look as impressive as it sounded. He designed a stunning, highly visual 2-column layout in a professional graphic design program. He exported his essay as a complex, graphics-heavy PDF file. Furthermore, right before submitting, he ran his final draft through a popular online grammar smoothing tool to ensure his vocabulary was perfectly polished, resulting in a highly uniform, mathematically predictable sentence structure. When Daniel uploaded his masterpiece to the foundation portal, the institutional applicant tracking system immediately attempted to parse the text. Because Daniel used a complex 2-column PDF format, the software read the document horizontally straight across the visual divide, entirely scrambling his sentences into completely incoherent, unreadable gibberish. The algorithm flagged the submission as a corrupted file. Simultaneously, the artificial intelligence detection software analyzed the underlying syntax of his writing. Because Daniel used a digital tool to smooth his grammar, his essay lacked the natural rhythmic variance of human speech. Every sentence was exactly 15 to 20 words long. The vocabulary was mathematically optimized. The software immediately flagged the essay as synthetically generated. Daniel, a brilliant and entirely honest student, was permanently blacklisted from the foundation for suspected academic dishonesty, and his application was discarded in 3 milliseconds. The human evaluators never even saw his name. Historical trends regarding automated screening systems clearly indicate that these algorithms penalize formatting complexity and reward absolute, brutal simplicity. To survive the digital gatekeeper, you must completely abandon your desire for aesthetic presentation. We must now explore a highly successful 2026 case study to understand exactly how to bypass the machine. Enter Sophia from Charlotte, North Carolina. Sophia applied for the exact same $80,000 technology grant. She also wrote a phenomenal essay, but she implicitly understood that her first audience was a machine, not a human. Sophia implemented a rigorous defensive strategy, known as the plain text protocol. Sophia did not use custom margins. She did not use custom typography. She wrote her entire essay in a standard, unformatted word processing document using Arial font at a standard 12-point size. Before she submitted her application, she copied her entire essay and pasted it into a basic, bare-bones text editor to systematically strip away any hidden HTML code, invisible formatting tags, or residual metadata that might confuse the parsing algorithm. When she uploaded her document, the applicant tracking system consumed her text flawlessly, perfectly indexing her core themes and seamlessly transferring her document to the human review queue. Furthermore, Sophia deliberately engineered her sentence structure to prove her own humanity to the artificial intelligence detection software. She understood that algorithms write in averages but humans write in dynamic spikes. She intentionally varied her sentence lengths to an extreme degree. She would write a beautifully complex 30-word sentence detailing a specific localized problem. She would immediately follow it with a blunt 3-word sentence. She used highly specific, unpredictable sensory nouns that an algorithm would never logically associate with her broader topic. By injecting this calculated rhythmic chaos into her syntax, she mathematically proved her proof of life to the detection software. She sailed past the digital gatekeepers with a 0% artificial intelligence probability score, landed directly on the desk of the human evaluator, and ultimately secured the massive $80,000 grant. To permanently immunize your application against these silent algorithmic assassins, you must immediately implement a 3-step mechanical audit before you ever click the submit button. First, you must perform the keyword alignment check. Applicant tracking systems are primitive search engines. They are programmed by the scholarship committee to scan your essay for the exact vocabulary used in the actual scholarship prompt. If the prompt asks for examples of civic duty and structural community building, you must artificially ensure those exact, specific phrases appear organically within your text. Do not use clever synonyms. If the machine is looking for the word leadership, and you use the word guidance, the machine will mark you as entirely irrelevant and discard your application. Second, you must execute the formatting Washington. Never submit a PDF file unless the application portal explicitly and unequivocally demands a PDF file. Portable document formats are notorious for corrupting parsing algorithms. You must submit a clean, entirely unformatted document file. You must remove all headers, all footers, all page numbers, and all stylistic indentations. The committee does not care if your essay looks pretty. They only care if their software can read it. You must present your narrative as a raw, unfiltered data stream. Third, you must conduct the predictability variance test. Look critically at the visual shape of your paragraphs. If every single paragraph is exactly the same length, and every single sentence follows the exact same subject-verb-object structure, you are placing yourself at massive risk for a false positive artificial intelligence flag. You must actively break the rhythm. Insert a dramatic one-sentence paragraph to emphasize a massive personal failure. Use an occasional em dash to interrupt your own thought process. Write the way a passionate human being actually speaks when they are desperately trying to communicate a vital truth to another person. You are not just proving your intelligence. You are providing undeniable mathematical proof of your own messy, authentic humanity. You have now completed the most exhaustive, scientifically grounded masterclass ever constructed for the United States scholarship application process. You have the exact psychological blueprints required to bypass both the digital algorithms and the exhausted human evaluators. You know exactly how to avoid the chronological resume recitation, how to perfectly balance the 1090 adversity rule, and how to entirely dismantle the grandiose savior complex. You have replaced forced thesaurus syndrome with cognitive fluency, and you have flipped the charity fallacy into a commanding investor power dynamic. You possess immense narrative velocity, a bulletproof academic bridge, and profound structural empathy. If you apply these frameworks with ruthless discipline, your potential outcomes for securing massive, life-altering financial funding in the 2026 cycle are mathematically superior to anyone competing against you. But securing the funding is only the first half of the battle. Your flawless essay will successfully kick down the heavy wooden door of the admissions office, but it only buys you a seat at the table. Once the committee reads your brilliant narrative, they are going to pick up the phone, call you into a sterile, high-pressure boardroom, and force you to defend every single word you just wrote in a live, highly combative interview. The rules of engagement in the interview room are completely different, and the psychological traps are infinitely more dangerous. If you hesitate for even a fraction of a second, the investor dynamic you carefully built will collapse instantly. The essay gets you the interview, but the interview secures the check, and next time, we are going to completely deconstruct the devastating psychological mistakes that currently destroy 90% of all finalist candidates in the final 10 minutes of their evaluation.